like a small boat on the ocean, sending big waves into motion, like how a single word can make a heart open. I might only have one match, but I can make an explosion.
Many look back at the progressive era and think of the rapid urbanization and industrialization taking place in America at the time. However, in the late 1840s, women began to gain traction on their movement to push for equal rights among women and men. During this time, women faced unequal treatment not only in the instance that they didn't have the right to vote, but also unequal treatment in the workplace by receiving lower wages than men for the same number of hours worked. The Seneca Falls Convention was the first meeting organized by women to discuss not only their goals in the suffrage movement, but also social, economic, and religious issues in the United States. During the Progressive Era, two organizations formed to help educate people about the goals of the suffrage movement, one of them being the National American Women's Suffrage Association and the National Woman's Party. Both of the organizations started campaigns to enfranchise women and continuously lobbied President Wilson in Congress to pass a women's suffrage amendment. Both organizations had the same goals, however. The National Woman's Party took the role of being a more militant organization with daily protests and pickets in front of the White House in order to try and get an amendment passed. The Women's National Party was the first suffrage organization to conduct marches in cities and committed acts of civil disobedience in their direct approach in lobbying for women's rights. In the later part of the 19th century, middle-class women began to establish houses known as settlement houses. These houses were established in urban areas and populated by women who wanted to help push for women's rights. Many of the people that lived and worked in settlement houses often went out into the local communities to try and convince more people that equal rights for women is something that the United States needed at the time. One of the most famous settlement houses, known as Hull House, was established by Jane Addams and Ellen Starr in a Chicago community in 1889. When Hull House first came about, they had things such as libraries, daycare services, and English classes that anyone in the community could come and benefit from. In the second year of the Hull House being established, they served over 3,000 people a week, and by 1900 they had expanded by making a gymnasium, more housing for working women, and meeting space for work unions. In the 1920 presidential election, women first got their chance to vote after 100 years of pushing for an amendment to be passed that allowed them that right. Starting in the early 1900s, many Western states began to allow women to start voting in local and state elections. However, women in the eastern states and southern states as well were still facing oppression from many lawmakers, which still prohibited to vote. Because of this, president of a women's suffrage organization known as National American Women's Suffrage Association came up with a blitzing campaign known as the Winning Plan in the eastern United States to try and lobby local and state lawmakers to allow women the right to vote. Many of the attempts in getting voting rights often involved in women participating in hunger strikes and White House protests, which were often met with violent confrontations among the women protesting and those who opposed voting rights for women. The decision to take a more radical approach in trying to lobby lawmakers and convince people that voting rights for women was needed was ultimately successful in gaining enough publicity for the movement moving into World War I. At the start of World War I, many suffragists began to see their movement lose interest among lawmakers in Washington. However, many of those suffragists went to work in factories making military supplies for the U.S., taking many jobs that men had left behind. And this showed many critics of women's voting rights that even though women have faced oppression for over 100 years, they're still willing to help their country in a time of need. 2 years after World War I ended, the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote in elections, was ratified, and those who fought for this right for so long were finally able to say all their perseverance paid off.
Do you think it was necessary for women to try and obtain the same equal rights as men, and why?
Well, you're asking me in past tense. Do I think it was necessary? I think it is still, unfortunately, a fight that women are still battling. Are they more equal? Sure, but I think that there is a long, unfortunate road to equality in general for women as well as other minorities.
I feel like it was necessary for women to obtain the rights, just because this is a whole teamwork system, and I feel like if one part isn't doing their job, the other part isn't, everyone's affected. It's like this chain reaction, and when someone's not getting equal rights, it's kind of like, hey, something's a little off here. We would be 2 times as strong with the power of women.
Yes, I do believe that it was right for women to gain the same rights as men because they bear children. They are human beings. Everyone living should have the same say.
I do think definitely it was important for women to obtain the same rights as men because basically men aren't the only one that are being affected by the stuff. Like for example, women's suffrage, was what we fought so hard for, was important to them because they should get a say on it because it's not just men that's being affected by the stuff that goes on in society, it's women as well.
I don't think it's necessary because women already had it made. They didn't have to work. They just did laundry, housework, and took care of the kids. And we didn't need women to vote because men run the country, as you can see.
No? Alright, I think it was necessary for women to have equal rights because they needed to have a say in government and they need to have equality in the country. So if they didn't have equal rights, then we as a country would not evolve and progress. And that's all I got.
Well, when it comes to women voting and women's suffrage, this country was founded on the idea of egalitarianism, which is the idea of equality for all people. So therefore, I think it was long overdue that women had to wait all the way up to 1920 to get something that they already deserved. I believe it was actually, John Adams' wife who actually promoted that idea long before the country was even created.